There's a house in Texas that's 400 square feet, costs less than a used pickup truck, and a woman who owns it just did something that would have been impossible 5 years ago. She paid it off in 18 months and never signed a single mortgage document. Meanwhile, the normal American home just crossed $400,000. The average first-time buyer now needs almost a decade to save a down payment. And yet, in 2026, something strange is happening. A quiet, 500 million square foot rebellion is spreading across backyards, deserts, forests, and city lots from Seattle to Savannah. People aren't just downsizing. They're opting out of a system that stopped working for them and building a completely different version of the American dream, one that fits on a trailer. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why this movement went from fringe hobby to a multi-billion-dollar industry almost overnight, which laws just changed to make this legal in your own backyard, and why some of the smartest investors in real estate are quietly betting everything on homes the size of a parking space. But before we get into it, if you're someone who's tired of the just work harder and save more advice that clearly isn't working for most people anymore, hit subscribe right now. We dig into the real, data-backed alternatives to the broken systems everyone assumes you just have to accept. You do not want to miss what's coming later in this video, because it involves a $98,000 house that thinks for itself. Let's get into it. Let's start with why this is happening at all, because the tiny home movement isn't some Pinterest aesthetic anymore. It's a direct response to a housing market that broke. Here's the math nobody wants to say out loud. Across major cities tracked by economists in 2025, median home prices hit roughly 8 times the median household income. For context, financial advisors have warned for decades that anything above 3 or 4 times your income is a stretch. We are now more than double that danger zone. In some coastal metros, land alone runs over $500 per square foot before you've laid a single brick. And it's not just the boomers had it easier complain anymore. Recent research found that 40% of American adults under 35 couldn't cover an unexpected $400 expense. Read that again. Not a $400,000 house. A $400 emergency. That's the financial reality a huge chunk of the workforce is living in, while traditional homeownership keeps drifting further out of reach. So people started asking a different question. Not, how do I afford that house? But do I actually need that house? And the numbers on the other side of that question are staggering. The global tiny home market is now valued in the tens of billions of dollars, with multiple industry analysts projecting it will keep climbing at a steady 4 to 6% every year through the end of the decade. In North America alone, tiny homes account for over half of that global growth, driven by a very specific combination of forces: remote work untethering people from expensive job hubs, retirees looking to downsize without downgrading their quality of life, and a generation of buyers who watched their parents drown in 30-year mortgages and said, hard pass. Turnkey tiny homes are now regularly selling in the $40,000 to $80,000 range, a fraction of what a down payment alone costs in most cities. And builders can't keep up. Some companies have reported scaling their annual output from roughly 40 units a year just a few years ago to well over 75 units a year now, with waitlists stretching 3 to 8 months in some cases. This isn't a niche. This is an industry racing to catch up with demand. Here's a statistic that genuinely stopped me when I found it. A nationwide survey of over 1,000 Americans found that 73% would consider living in a tiny home. Not, think it's a cute idea for other people. Would consider it for themselves. Break that down by generation. And it gets even more interesting. Among Gen Z and millennials, that number jumps to 75%. This isn't an old-school, minimalist fringe movement anymore. This is becoming a mainstream financial strategy for the 2 generations that got hit hardest by rising rents, stagnant wages, and interest rates that, even as they've eased slightly, remain well above what previous generations paid. And here's the part that really matters. 86% of people surveyed think tiny homes are a good option, specifically for first-time buyers. People aren't just fantasizing about van life on Instagram. They're looking at a spreadsheet, looking at their savings account, and making a calculated decision that a smaller, fully owned home beats a larger, deeply financed one. But there's a catch. For decades, there was one massive obstacle standing between millions of Americans and this exact solution. And in 2026, that obstacle started collapsing state by state. If you try to build a tiny home in most of America, even 3 or 4 years ago, here's what you were up against. Minimum square footage requirements that made tiny homes illegal by definition. Zoning codes that classified anything on wheels as an RV, which meant you legally couldn't live in it full-time. And local boards with the power to say no for basically any reason they wanted. That wall is coming down fast, and most people have no idea it's happening. In 2026 alone, more than a dozen states updated their accessory dwelling unit laws. That's the legal term for a small secondary home on existing property, often shortened to ADU. California made it permanently legal to build and rent out an ADU without living on the property yourself. No more temporary exemptions. That rule is gone for good. Colorado now requires most municipalities to allow at least one ADU on every single-family lot. Montana passed similar statewide protections. Georgia made headlines with a bill designed to legalize small homes under 400 square feet across the entire state, overriding local governments that had banned them outright. New York City quietly legalized ADUs across all 5 boroughs in every 1- and 2-family home. Chicago expanded its accessory dwelling program citywide after running it as a small pilot for years. Seattle went even further and eliminated single-family-only zoning entirely, now allowing up to 4 homes on a single lot. Even famously restrictive housing markets are cracking open. Now, it's important to be honest here. This isn't a free-for-all everywhere. States like New York, New Jersey, Wisconsin, Iowa, and a handful of others still have zoning frameworks that make full-time tiny home living genuinely difficult, especially for homes on wheels, which are frequently still classified and regulated like RVs. Location still matters enormously, and anyone seriously considering this route needs to check their specific city and county, not just their state. But the direction of travel is unmistakable. Local governments that spent decades saying no are now being legally forced to say yes, because state legislators finally admitted what buyers already knew. The old rules were making the housing shortage worse, not better. So who is actually doing this? It's not who you'd assume. Yes, they're the classic off-grid dreamers: solar panels, composting toilets, rainwater collection systems, living 20 minutes from the nearest neighbor. That part of the movement is still very real, and tiny homeowners on average consume over 50% less in resources and utilities than a typical household, which is a genuinely massive environmental footprint reduction. But increasingly, the fastest growing group looks completely different. It's the retiree who sold a paid-off 4-bedroom house, pocketed the difference, and moved into a 350 square foot home on a piece of land near their grandkids, with zero mortgage and a healthy retirement account instead. It's the remote worker who realized their job doesn't care whether they're logging in from a $3,000 a month apartment in a major metro or a fully owned tiny home on cheap rural land, and chose the option that builds wealth instead of draining it. Remote work now accounts for over a quarter of full-time U.S. employment, and that single shift is quietly rewritten where an entire generation is choosing to live. It's also, increasingly, homeowners who aren't moving into a tiny home at all. They're building one in the backyard. A recent national survey found that 44% of Americans would consider putting an ADU on their own property specifically to generate rental income. And nearly 3/4 believe local governments should be actively incentivizing this kind of construction to fight the housing shortage. Among people who already own an alternative living space, 41% rent out, turning a backyard structure into a second income stream without buying a single additional piece of land. This is the part that really redefines the American dream. It's no longer just own a big house with a white picket fence. For a growing number of people, the dream now looks like own something outright, keep the freedom to move, and never again be one layoff away from losing it all. Now here's where it gets genuinely wild. And this is the part one promised you earlier. A handful of companies are no longer just building smaller houses. They're building smarter ones. One notable example, a 400 square foot home priced around $98,000 that comes with an expandable structure and built-in artificial intelligence, managing the heating, lighting, and security systems automatically. Hundreds of units were pre-ordered before the first one even shipped. Other manufacturers are leaning into prefab speed and modular design. Steel-framed units built in a factory, trucked to a lot, and set up in days instead of months, with online configurators letting buyers customize layouts the same way you'd customize a car order. One company even landed a multi-million-dollar contract supplying compact, modular housing to a renewable energy workforce project. Proof that this isn't just a residential trend. It's becoming industrial infrastructure. And it's not just about being smaller or smarter. It's about being nicer than people expect. 2026 has seen a distinct shift toward high-end, luxury tiny homes. European-inspired minimalist design, real hardwood interiors, floor-to-ceiling glass, spa-style bathrooms, all inside a footprint smaller than most people's living rooms. This isn't the shed with a loft bed stereotype from a decade ago. Some of these homes look like they belong in an architecture magazine. Now, if this all sounds like a perfect, no downside solution, it isn't. And I'd be doing you a disservice not to say so. Space is genuinely, permanently limited. Storage is minimal. Privacy for couples or families can be a real strain. And hosting guests is often just not realistic. Some owners openly report that the lifestyle shift puts pressure on relationships in ways they didn't anticipate before moving in. Financing is also trickier than a traditional mortgage. Most tiny homes don't qualify for standard 30-year home loans, which means buyers are often relying on personal loans, RV loans, or straight-up cash. And that changes the entire math of who this is actually accessible to. And even with all the zoning progress we just talked about, the legal landscape is still a genuine patchwork. What's perfectly legal in one county can be a $1,000 a day fine in the county right next to it. The single biggest mistake people make isn't buying the wrong tiny home. It's buying one before confirming, in writing, with their local planning department, that they're allowed to actually live in it long term. This is a real, viable path for a lot of people. It is not a magic loophole with zero trade-offs. So where does this go from here? Every major industry forecast points the same direction. Continued growth, continued mainstreaming, and continued legal expansion as more states realize that fighting small, affordable housing options makes their housing crisis worse. We're likely to see tiny home villages and planned communities keep expanding, dedicated developments where zoning, utilities, and shared amenities are already built in, removing the legal guesswork entirely for buyers. We're likely to see more institutional money enter the space too, with some analysts speculating that real estate investment structures could eventually start bundling portfolios of tiny homes the same way they currently bundle apartment complexes or vacation rentals. And most importantly, we're likely to see the definition of the American dream keep quietly shifting for an entire generation, away from the biggest house you can finance and toward the smallest amount of debt you can live with. That's not a downgrade. For a lot of people watching this right now, it might be the first version of homeownership that's actually felt possible in years. So would you actually do it? Would you trade square footage for zero debt and total freedom? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know if this is a real option you consider or a hard no. If this video gave you a new way to think about what owning a home could actually look like, do 3 quick things. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss the next deep dive. Drop a like so this reaches more people who need to see it. And check out the next video, where we break down exactly how much a tiny home really costs once you add land, permits, and hookups, because the sticker price is not the full story. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.